page 377, and we're looking at factoring. So before I start example number 1, let's just talk about how factoring works. So the step 1 always should be to look for the greatest common factor. So we call it GCF between all your terms. If you don't do this step, sometimes you can't even do the next steps, and sometimes even though you can do the next steps, it's more complicated and then you have to do the step afterwards anyways. So that should be always your first step. Step 2 is going to be to look at the number of terms, because the number of terms then gives us a hint as to what kind of factoring technique we can use. If you see only 2 terms, then we use the method called difference of squares. If you see 3 terms, we use the method either inspection, or we call another option afterwards, depending on the kind we have, is either decomposition or chart. Okay? And if you have 4 terms, then we use a method called grouping. So obviously these things don't make sense right now, but we are going to go through each of these examples. The very first example that you're going to see is for method of inspection. Okay, this is the one that you will probably see most of the time. So it comes with the form that is trinomial. So if you remember from Unit 7, when we were looking at the 3 ways that quadratic equations was given, the first one, which is called a general form, is given in this form. So the general form ax squared plus bx plus c, that is a trinomial here, where right now we're focusing on only on when the first leading term is a positive 1, meaning you won't really see a leading term in here, because whenever there's no term in front, it means there's a 1. Okay, so how does this method work? So this one in here, what we're trying to do is we're trying to write this polynomial in factored form as multiplication of 2 factors. So it goes with SP. So the middle number is the one that you want your sum to be. So you want to be able to combine it and make that number. And the P is for the product. You want the numbers to multiply to become that last number. You'll notice I bring my signs with me because that is very important. So you want to think of 2 numbers that will multiply to become positive 12, but will add to become negative 8. Now remember, adding, subtracting, there are infinite possibilities that we can make an 8. What's more restrictive is what numbers will multiply to become 12. So there's only a few options which will multiply to become 12, and this is it. 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4, and then that's it. That's why I first write down the product, because I know there's only limited ways that I can multiply to make this number. Now I want 2 of these that will actually either add or subtract to become 8, and the only one that will work here is my 2 and 6. Next thing I want to focus is on what kind of signs can I put in. So both of these have to be negative, because negative 2 and negative 6 will give me negative 8. If one is negative and the other is positive, they combine, they actually subtract. Okay, so if you want the answer to add, you either need both signs to be negative, or you need both signs to be positive. That's the only way we can get them to combine. So now you want to check if that works for multiplication. Negative times negative gives you positive 12. So once you know that these numbers work, you simply take your variable, so that's x, make them into 2 brackets, and you go negative 2 and negative 6. It doesn't matter which one you put first. This is multiplication, so the order is not going to matter. Okay, so let's take a look here. I want so again it's SP, I want my product to be positive 30, but I want my sum to be 13. So numbers that make 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. So again, 3 and 10 might work. So if I go 3 and 10, both positive, and they will multiply to become 30 as well. So now I'm just going to write this as x and write plus 3 plus 10. Okay. You can stop this video and try the rest of these questions and check your answers, or you can keep continuing watching to see how the rest of them are done. So now again, SP, the product has to be negative 30 and the sum has to be negative 13. So they're showing you how to deal with the same numbers, but how the signs make a difference. At this time, I can't pick 3 and 10 again, because if I do negative 3 and negative 10, the sum will work, but the product will not work, because this will give you positive 30, not negative 30. So 3 and 10 actually don't work for me. So I have to pick another option. So 2 and 15 could work here. If I make my bigger number negative and my smaller number positive, the sum here would become negative 13. And because they're opposite signs, they will multiply to become negative 30. So now this works. So again, I'm going to write it down. So signs make a big difference. You need to make sure your signs are working in here. If you're not comfortable with your signs, please go and take a look at sign for integer sign rules. The last one here is where my product is still positive 30, but my sum here has to be negative 11. So this time I am going to use 5 and 6, because if I keep them both negative, they will add to become negative 11. And when I multiply them, they multiply to become positive 30. So x minus 5 and x minus 6.